actually was diagnosed minutes after I was born, so my calcium levels were so low that my body was pretty much in shock, and I was in tetany, which is where all the muscles in my body lock up, where my hands and feet turn in, my bones become stiff. It's pretty much like all over my body Charlie horses.
Hypoparathyroidism, in most cases, is caused by surgical removal of the parathyroid glands. But there are also cases of hypoparathyroidism that are caused by genetic conditions, autosomal dominant hypocalcemia type 1. And this is due to variants or mutations in the calcium sensing receptor, wherein the thermostat of the parathyroid gland is broken.
Calcilytics are a class of drug that target a receptor called the calcium sensing receptor. And just like its name sounds, this receptor monitors our blood calcium levels and makes sure it stays in a nice, normal range.
Calcium is a very important component in maintaining muscle contraction, and when the calcium level is low, they can have what's called tetany, so muscle constriction, muscle contraction, and that can happen in skeletal muscle, but it can also happen in the larynx, and so they can get laryngospasm and have difficulty breathing. So there are some significant consequences to low calcium. Some of the children that have this genetic form of hypocalcemia can result in severe infantile seizures, which can lead to death.
Maintenance of blood calcium levels within a very narrow normal range is really critical for normal biological functioning. And the way that is regulated is by parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is made by the parathyroid glands. The parathyroid glands and parathyroid hormone essentially have one job, and that's to maintain blood calcium within a very narrow normal range.
You try so hard, to keep things really, really level. But if you eat too much, you drink too much, you do whatever, then you're in a bad situation and you end up taking a whole lot more calcium to make up for it because you don't realize the different things that can affect. If it's too hot, you start sweating, oh my gosh, your calcium's dropped. The next thing you know, you're cramped up like this, or your face is going crazy.
And so when we eat calcium and it goes above our upper level of normal, the calcium sensing receptor signals to our body to excrete it through our urine. In individuals with ADH1, the variants or the changes to the gene that encodes this receptor cause patients to excrete too much calcium. So patients with ADH1 will ultimately suffer from low blood calcium and high urine calcium as a result of the calcium sensing receptor being overactive.
And so it's a very difficult balance when they start getting treatment to keep their calcium high enough so they don't have any symptoms of the hypocalcemia, but at the same time not experiencing any of the challenges of having excess calcium in their urine. And as a nephrologist, I'm really concerned about the kidneys because excess calcium in the urine can actually cause kidney stones and also cause kidney damage.
So I was constantly getting labs done, and then I was on the World Caltrol orally, which is just to help increase my calcium. And I was on that at pretty large doses as a baby, and that worked out really well up until about 2 or 3. And then that's when I passed my first kidney stone. And then that's when my endocrinologist ordered a scan and saw that the sensor also on my kidneys, as well as the sensor on my parathyroid, is gone, which is what prompted the ADH1 testing. I remember my mom telling me that during an ultrasound, the first one, it lit up like a Christmas tree from the crystals. And I remember her looking panicked, and she looked at me and she's like, look, it's just diamonds. You're just bejeweled. It's okay. God made you sparkly. That's really what prompted kind of more intensive care for the ADH1 is after that, because my doctor realized it's not just the normal hypopara. It's not just the blood calcium that we gotta be worried about now.
The problem with treating patients with ADH1 with what we call standard of care therapy, that is calcium and active vitamin D, is that because patients with ADH1 have the additional deficit of the calcium sensing receptor in the kidney, they release a lot more calcium into the urine than patients with post-surgical hypoparathyroidism who have normal calcium sensing receptors in their kidney. So when you give a patient with ADH1 conventional therapy with calcium and active vitamin D, you significantly raise their urinary calcium relatively much higher than patients with post-surgical. And the result is you put them at risk for calcification of the kidney and kidney insufficiency and even kidney failure.
Mike and I have known each other for a long time. In fact, Mike came to my office in 1995 or 1996 and was asking me about the work I was doing then, which involved what class of drugs that are called calcimimetics.
The pharmaceutical company was NPS Pharmaceutical Companies in Salt Lake City, Utah. This was pre-internet. I called long-distance information, got the number of NPS Pharmaceuticals, ended up eventually talking to Ed Nemeth about this. Ed was one of the people at NPS that had basically discovered the calcium sensing receptor. Ed was responsible for the invention of these drugs, these calcimimetics.
Calcimimetics are so called because they mimic or potentiate the effects of extracellular calcium at this protein receptor.
This relationship with NPS Pharmaceuticals represents what we now call a public-private partnership. And I think it was really a wonderful thing, and I think it's a wonderful thing today. And this is what, we've engaged with BridgeBio and Calcilytics as well.
BridgeBio is an organization that seeks to provide as many meaningful medicines as possible for patients suffering from genetic disease. We hew to several different values that we proposed when we started, and I think they're still very important to us today. One is put patients first, another is let your science speak, a third is every minute counts.
One of the fundamental building blocks of the company from the get-go was the creation of a group of drug hunters.
I'm Jeremy Chang, and I'm a drug hunter. We are a small team at BridgeBio whose sole responsibility is to scan the literature and speak with leading academics to identify promising new therapies for development.
So Mike calls up one of our drug hunters one day and says, well, I don't know if you guys are interested, but there's this really interesting disease of calcium handling I've been working on for a large part of my career. We had this tool compound, it went away. Nobody seems to be developing anything for this. Are you guys interested? And we said, sure, let's learn more about it.
It was because of the relationship that Mike had with Ed that led to the first ever study of a calcilytic drug in patients with ADH1. And while that drug didn't move forward, it was the proof of concept that this class of drugs could work in patients with ADH1. And so that was the trigger for BridgeBio to set out to find the compound within the calcilytic class.
And it literally was sitting on a shelf in Japan with nobody's interested in it, sort of collecting dust.
So, what the team at BridgeBio did is they went out and looked at all of the calcilytics that had been developed for osteoporosis. And they tried to identify the molecule that had those characteristics. They would raise blood parathyroid hormone levels for a sustained period of time. And they found the molecule, and that's how we got to encaleret.
Encaleret is a drug that targets the underlying genetic change that patients with ADH1 have.
In theory, you want to start from scratch and do the entire drug development process, which is a multi-year process, sometimes takes decades to hone in on the correct compound. Encaleret, because it had been tested in another indication in real-life human beings for as long as a full year, that safety database of this drug, that again is priceless in developing a drug.
Again, I think if you meet a patient with low serum calcium levels, high urine calcium levels, a mass action disease for which every minute matters, and you ask them, should I start with a molecule that is already in the clinic versus taking an additional 5 years, they would tell you, create that medicine as quickly as possible. And that's what we're doing, and that is really our ethical responsibility.
the big information and guidance we got was by measuring calcium levels, we could understand how exactly to customize this to an individual patient's.
Living with ADH1, it's constantly a balance of, to put it bleakly, life or death. One common cold to me could be ending up in the hospital needing, calcium infusions at the worst case scenario, or it's gonna be me and tetany on my couch, not able to move, or even play with my kid now. So having a medication that is made for ADH1, it would open up so many more doors for people to actually be able to truly function at the best that they should be able to.
So if we could really target the cause of their hypopara, whether it be genetic or post-surgical, we would really be able to help a lot of people.
The Calcilytics team is incredibly dedicated to the work that we're doing, but it's our relationships with the team at the NIH, with other global experts in ADH1, and with patient advocacy organizations that all coming together make a really incredible team that are dedicated to people with ADH1.
It's pretty motivating, isn't it, to be able to help patients like that. And we developed this partnership with them at the NIH and BridgeBio, now Calcilytics. And it's really a tremendous win-win-win situation. And the biggest winner, I think, is the patients. And it's really nice to be able to do this.